about that? Good morning, everyone. It is 8:40 right now, and time to visit with Rekha from the Des Moines Register. She is back.
Our world traveler is back in the metro.
Back again like a bad penny.
Your suitcase must have all kinds of stickers on it.
My
from all
suitcase
the
is so
places you-
falling apart, is what it is. It's
And
been
the stickers
crammed
are
and
holding it
overcrammed.
together, right?
Exactly. That's it. You got it. No.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Well, you were able to make it back to the metro for a pretty special event that happened last night with Annette
Yes,
Bening being in town. I'm seeing it
indeed.
all over social media. What was going on?
She's wonderful. So Planned Parenthood of the Heartland was having a 100th anniversary celebration. Nationally, Planned Parenthood is 100 years old. And so they had a big one in, I think, D.C. and New York. They've had them around the country.
Okay.
But they did one here. And she came to be the keynote speaker. And she has incredible Iowa ties. As it turns out, both of her parents were from Iowa.
I didn't know that.
I know. Her mother was from LaPorte City and father from Waterloo, and they both met at the University of Iowa. And they actually moved to Kansas before she was born, so she didn't grow up here, but she still has relatives here, and in fact, she stayed with a cousin while she was here.
Are you serious?
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Why don't we know about Donna Reed, but we don't know about Annette Bening, and that's, current
That is
past.
pretty neat to hear that.
I saw pictures and I'm like, what in the world is she doing here besides just being very passionate about the cause? But then to
Yes.
hear that there's Iowa roots there, you love
Exactly.
hearing that.
Exactly, and it should be noted that she came at her own expense. She flew at her own expense. She did not take any kind of honorarium.
Wow.
She wanted to donate the time to Planned Parenthood because she really believes in the cause, and she spoke very passionately about.
So it sounds like a
reproductive
nice
choice.
person.
Very nice person, super down to earth, easy to talk to, just lovely. I was really lucky to get a few minutes with her privately beforehand. They were trying to arrange. Planned Parenthood had been trying to set up a private interview for me before the fact, like by telephone, but her handlers were really skittish and, what questions are you going to ask, and da da da. And then they ultimately said no, so I thought it wasn't going to happen, but the handlers didn't come with her.
Oh,
so I got
good.
her all to myself.
That's the best way to do it, isn't it?
Exactly, for like 15 minutes.
So
that
are we
was-
going to see that in a future article, or what,
We'll
what
be
is
seeing
that?
that most likely on Friday.
On Friday? Okay, looking
look
forward
forward
to
to
that.
it,
Look
yeah.
for it.
So let's talk
exactly.
about what's happening in the paper today.
Okay, so, what's happening in the world today is kind of weird. This business about the baseball game, congressional baseball game
Practice,
in DC,
yeah.
or practice, yeah.
Practicing for a fundraiser this morning. In case you are just turning the TV on, there has been a shooting and 5 people injured from what we
In
understand.
Alexandria, Virginia, they do have a person in custody at this time, but basically opened fire at this practice, taking down 5 people, one of them being a congressman. They're saying security was on site, so they're thankful that more weren't injured, but no names or anything other than who was hit have been released at
And
this
what
time.
do we know about this baseball game? What's the charity?
Not
They're
sure what the
raising money
charity
for?
was, but just a congressional basebal game. They do charities like this all the time.
And
They
it's
just
something
get ready
that
for it.
the Democrats against the Republicans, it's all in good fun. They
Right.
get together. But these were just Republicans who were practicing, right?
It's what it sounded like.
Yes.
Well, that's chilling. That's chilling. My gosh, it's just getting more and more frequent. That
Yeah,
we
it just
hear about these
happened,
things,
so
and
we're just
so
getting more
the story
information
will
as the
develop.
minutes go by.
Anyway, but
Apparently, the
speaking-
Republican baseball team holds practice every morning at 6:30. Bless your hearts for getting up
Wow,
early and
that's
doing
dedication.
that. Yeah,
and the Democrats sleep in until about 12:30.
Yeah, the field is
But
open until then,
volunteerism,
yeah.
right?
The Republicans, they hog the field till about noon or so.
So I guess they would have known that this would have happened on a regular basis. But
Anyone
I'm sure
who was looking to attack.
Right.
yeah,
So more
whatever.
details, I'm sure, will be coming out soon. We're getting the latest now is from CNN as it's coming down. But what are you talking
Well,
about
so
in today's
that's a
Des Moines
weird.
Register?
That's actually an interesting segue to what I'm talking about, which
Okay.
also involves Congress. It involves a congressional race here in Iowa. So Kim Weaver had been running against Steve King, and this was her second try for the 4th District congressional race.
Right.
And we all know who Steve King is. He's far right wing and full of very inflammatory statements about LGBT people and immigrants and people of color and true Americans and not true Americans and cultural continuity and all of this stuff. Very, very right wing as far as I'm concerned, very loathsome in his policies. Kim Weaver tried last time to run against him, and nobody so far has been able to come even close, including Christy Vilsack and several other, I think fairly well-qualified people have not been able to do it. But she decided, good for her, to make another go of it this year. And then there's a story published in the Register about how 8 years ago, in 2009, she used to do tarot card readings, and she did some of them online and some of them on a podcast that she paid for. And she charged, in the story it said anywhere from $1.99 to $3.99 a minute. She told me it was actually $1.99, and that there is, get this, another Kim Weaver who lives in the same district, who's also in politics, but a Republican who also considers herself a medium. Isn't that crazy?
That's bizarre.
And yeah, and she was on a city council in the district. So she says that Kim Weaver was the one who was charging $3.99. It wasn't her. She was charging $1.99, and half of that went to pay for the podcast. Royalties or whatever it is. But anyway, be that as it may, after the story broke, she has gotten so much pushback from Democrats, she says primarily from Democrats, saying that she should drop out of the race, that she was not a viable candidate anymore, that she was trying to screw people out of their money, that she was a liar, just all kinds of nonsense. And I get it. When you throw out the word psychic, then people have this visceral reaction like charlatan and fraud and what's a psychic. But you go to the state fair and there's somebody reading your fortune and you pay money for it willingly, knowingly, because it's fun. You don't put your whole life in somebody's hands. You just do it. I have a good friend here. I've been wanting to bring her on the show sometime, actually, named Molly. And she is a card reader. And a bunch of us friends go to her. She has this beautiful, nurturing little home with low lighting and incense. And she could do a reading for you on the air.
We'd be more than willing to.
If you're up for that. Yeah.
No question we're up for that.
She's fantastic. And what she does is, it's a very nurturing kind of a thing. She has long white hair. I mean, she looks the part too. And she's just super, super supportive of everyone. And she'll read about trends. She never tells anything frightening. She just says, what are the trends going on? What are the undercurrents in your life? What are you up against? What are you facing? Here's what you have working for you, that kind of thing. But she doesn't scare people. So Kim Weaver was doing essentially the same thing, but on the air. And I actually heard one of the podcasts, and she's very supportive. And she actually offers this woman who's wondering where her disappeared husband is, whether he's dead or alive. He went to the doctor one day and never came back. And Weaver says to her very compassionately, I'd like to do an in-depth reading for you off the air, and I won't charge you anything for it. So she's hardly taking advantage of people. And anyone who reads their horoscope in the newspaper, for God's sake, is willingly submitting to that game, or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think there's anything lethal about it or deceptive about it. It's just a thing that some people do. In India, they take it very seriously, astrology. But that's a different subject. Anyway.
So you think people are scared about the unknown of what she was practicing or
I think
doing?
That people were just so kind of scandalized by the word psychic, telephone for pay, that they just started to distance themselves from her. And Democrats in particular, Republicans hung back because they didn't have to do anything, right? They just let the Democrats devour each other. So she pulled out of the race while I was away.
It's a job.
She dropped out of the race. I know. And my
couldn't she just take the tarot cards and put them down and let her know herself what's going on?
That's the interesting thing. I said to her, would you have done this she said, if you knew that you were going to run in the future? She said, I had no idea. At the time, I was not thinking I was ever going to be a candidate for political office. I was just doing it because it was a fun thing to do. She said it hardly supported me. But to my mind, that makes her an interesting character, and it makes her a real character. And there are other things about her that make her very real, like the fact that she suffered from postpartum depression when her children were born. The fact that she's worrying about the loss of a job. She works for the state long-term care ombudsman's office, looking out at nursing homes to make sure everything is on the up and up and patients are being treated properly. And she had lap band surgery and lost 130 pounds. And she's worried about losing her job because then she wouldn't have health insurance. And that's a big problem right now. So all of these are real people things, that real Iowans and people across the country struggle with. And I think that makes her an authentic person. And I really fail to see why something like this should have torpedoed her campaign, except that it did. Also, one more thing to mention is that in the first 3 months of this year, she raised $144,000 more than Steve King. Imagine that.
So there's obviously support for her then.
There's support. I think a lot of it came from out-of-state Democrats because, they wanted to see King lose and they were willing to put money behind anyone. But the fact is, there is something very interesting about her, and she has devoted a good part of her life to supporting people who were vulnerable. And single mothers. She was also a single mother, and people who live in nursing homes. And if that is in fact the case, that Democrats wanted to distance themselves from her, and I did read some things online. There were quite a lot of mean-spirited things said online, and she actually believes that it was a Democrat who leaked this to the press, this story. Then they're chicken. Then they just don't have any guts. So I think it's really a shame what happened, and I think we should all look at ourselves and say, come on, have some guts. It's a little bit out of the ordinary, but so what? Look at the kinds of charlatans we have in office. In Italy, there was a porn star who served 5 years in the parliament. Nobody batted an eyelid.
Yeah, even
right?
in the States, I think there was somebody
was there a porn star?
Of that profession that was running for office, too.
And then look at Toronto. The former mayor and city council member was a crack addict. And that was on video. So, I think this is really pretty tame by comparison.
So you see it as someone who's more accepting and more well-rounded as a human being that we can all have, a connection with, as opposed to someone who doesn't fit the usual atypical that we're looking for someone that's running for political office, especially here locally.
Not born into wealth, not born into a political legacy, but someone who moves among real people and happens to live in that district and has for 25 years. And I think it's just a real shame that this issue had to torpedo her chances.
That is a shame, especially if she had the ability to use the cards to her advantage and predict the future. How much of an advantage would that have been?
Well, it could have been sizable, but that's if you believe in that stuff, which, I take it with a huge grain of salt. I think it's fun to do. I don't put much stock in it.
All right, we'll read more in today's Des Moines Register, Rekha's article. Also something interesting you might want to follow up with, Rekha, after the shooting this morning in Virginia, the House Natural Resources Committee, they were scheduled to have a hearing on gun legislation today. That has been canceled. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, he was supposed to testify at the House Foreign Affairs Committee. That has been postponed due to today's shootings as well.
Really?
So
we'll keep
you
how
up to date.
Timely gun legislation, my gosh. Maybe one always helps that something like this is going to have an impact and make people realize we really need to tighten our gun laws, but so far,
nothing so far. And don't forget to check out the paper on Friday with one-on-one that Rekha had with Annette Benning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks,
Great
Rekha.
to see you.
It is 8:52. We will be right back. This is CW Iowa Live in West Des Moines.